What's up, channel? Welcome back to LIFM. Thought I'd do something a little bit different today. We haven't done an EDH deck tech in a while, so I'm going to be showing you guys my Trostani EDH deck. For those who don't know what Trostani does, well, you're looking at it right now anyways, but it's green, green, white, white for a 2/5 Dryad, and the ability is whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to its toughness. For 1 green, white, and tap, you can also populate. So it's obviously going to be a token generation deck. So I'm going to be running a lot of cards that go towards that. So starting off with the land base, I run a few non-basic lands, not a lot. So Gavony Township, I'm going to be having a lot of tokens, or at least I intend to have a lot of tokens. This seems like a pretty solid card. Grove of the Guardian. It can become a really big creature for me to potentially populate with my commander. Temple Garden hits both my colors. Emeria is a creature, I want to say reanimation, recursion, whatever you want to call it. Selesnya, guildgate, yeah, I know, it's a common, comes into play tapped, but adds both my colors. And Reliquary Tower. I don't especially have a lot of card drawing here, but sometimes I do end up keeping cards in my hand for the appropriate time, and it's better if you don't have to discard cards rather than you have to discard cards. As for basics, I obviously run a lot of basics. I run 14 planes. And I run 16 forests. I run 16 forests because well, some of the green creatures I run are pretty green heavy, and I also run cards to search for lands, and I want to make sure I can play those whenever I draw them. Moving on to the creatures, a lot of the creatures, they either make tokens when they come into play, or they have an ability that creates tokens. So starting off at the lower end of the spectrum, we have Blade Splicer. Pretty solid card early game. Witness doesn't make tokens, but it sure as hell gets back cards that do make tokens. So she's in here. Solemn gets me lands. Hero of Bladehold, she's a perfect fit in this deck. Not only does she pump my creatures when she's attacking with them, she also makes tokens when she attacks. So she fits perfectly into this deck. Master of the Wild Hunt also makes tokens every turn, and his second ability actually allows him to kind of double as creature removal because of that fight ability. Acidic Slime doesn't make any creatures, but it's a pretty good removal card. It'll normally hit something that I don't like. Geist-honored Monk. Another creature that makes tokens. I like that card a lot. It's at least a 3/3, but usually in this deck it'll be a lot bigger. Sigarda doesn't make any tokens, but she's in there for sack outlets or stuff like Live in Death or whatever it's called. So I only get the good part of cards like that. Ant Queen, 5 for a 5/5 that makes tokens for 2 mana. Just a beautiful card in this deck. Just a very good card in this deck. Especially when it's coupled with cards like Seedborn Muse. Another one that doesn't make tokens, but it enables all my my other stuff to do more. Like Ant Queen. And Kamahl also. He doesn't make tokens, but with his overrun ability and the ability to make lands 1/1 creatures, he goes well in this deck. Requiem Angel, she's an interesting one. I don't know if a lot of people play this card, but she basically says whenever another non-spirit creature you control dies, you get a 1/1 spirit that flies. So even if some of my other tokens die, as long as they weren't spirits, I get 1/1 flying spirit tokens. And it's 6 for a 5/5 flyer. Captain of the Watch, 6 mana for a 3/3, and she's actually a Soldier Lord. She has vigilance. She gives all my other soldiers +1/+1 in vigilance, and when she comes into play, she makes 3 soldiers. So for 6 mana, you get, what is that, 9 power. Seems pretty solid to me. Armada Wurm, 6 mana for 2 5/5 tramplers. One of them that I can populate. Hornet Queen, this is a card that I know sees a lot of play in EDH. I'm still waiting for them to make the tokens to go with it. Just a really solid card. And Avenger of Zendikar, it doesn't really get much more solid than this as far as token generation goes. This card can just be really brutal. And I can fetch it with Green Sun Zenith or stuff like that. Especially when it's coupled with cards like Elesh Norn. Avenger of Zendikar can really get out of control really quickly. She doesn't make any tokens, but she sure as hell pumps the tokens that you have, and she reduces the power and toughness of your opponent's creature, so that's pretty good in a deck like this. And Avacyn I threw in here because, you know, when you're constantly using cards to make tokens, people are going to want to wipe the board, so it's good if it's harder for them to do that. Verdant Force is a card that I've always liked the card, and it usually doesn't fit in a lot of decks. The new Force cards do so more, the red one and the white one. But I like this card, and it's actually done pretty well in this deck so far. If people can't deal with it right away, you can get a lot of tokens. And if you have a way to abuse that ability, it's even better. Craterhoof. This guy, when this guy hits play, the game is normally ending that turn. As you've seen from the creatures that I have, I'll probably have a lot of tokens when I choose to cast this guy, and it's normally just game over that turn. Just a really, really, really good card, especially in decks like this. So those are the creatures. As you can see, I don't run a ton of creatures because I run token generators. So moving on to the instances, you're not really going to see anything out of the ordinary as far as my instances go. Maybe a couple cards. So Path to Exile, Oblation, which might actually come out, I'm not sure yet. I mainly use it to save my permanents and draw cards, because I run a lot of enchantments, stuff like that. Swords, which I'm probably going to try to switch out for the new art. I like the new art a lot better. White Sun Zenith, now this is a really good card in this deck. I'm normally doing it for a lot. Last time I played it I made 12 2/2s. So a really good card in this deck, and it shuffles back in, which is pretty good. Tangle. I don't see a lot of people playing Tangle, but if you play this card right, it can be a blowout. Tapping someone's creatures down for a turn can be the difference between living and dying. So just a really strong card, and it made the cutover moments piece even though it has flashback, just because it keeps them tapped. Rootbound Defenses is in here because it populates at instant speed, and it also makes my creatures indestructible for a turn, so that's a pretty good pro. In Seed Spark, I figured I'd be running at least one card that destroys an artifact or enchantment at instant speed, so it might as well be one that gets me tokens from doing it. So Seed Spark, really solid in this deck. Moving on to the sorceries, we have Hunting Wilds. Gets me 2 forests. Explosive Vegetation usually gets me 2 plains. Green Sun Zenith usually gets me Avenger Zendikar, or even better, Craterhoof. Increase in Devotion gets me 5 tokens under normal circumstances, 10 from Flashback, with other effects a lot more. Austere Command is a very good wrath for a deck like this because you get to control what you want to get rid of and what you want to keep. Terminus, because I'm not the only person who plays Avacyn, or any creature with Hexproof or Shroud. Decree of Justice, I have this in the sorcery section, but it should be an instant section. I almost always cast it, cycle it to draw a card and get tokens at instant speed, so it should probably be in the instant section. Kodama's Reach, more mana. Harmonize, 3 cards don't hurt. Hour of Reckoning is a board wipe that destroys all creatures, but it leaves all my tokens. So it destroys all non-token creatures. It also has Convoke, so it can end up costing me not a lot with a deck like this. Day of Judgment, nothing special here. We've all seen it before. Conqueror's Pledge makes me 6 white car soldiers. If I pay the kicker, it doubles that. With other effects, obviously it's more. Gelatinous Genesis can make a lot of big ooze creatures. Crush of Worms, probably not the best token generator, token maker, but it's one of those cards that when I started playing Magic, it had just came out, and it's kind of good to go back and play with a card like this, especially in a fun deck. This is definitely a fun deck. Primal Command. It's one of my ways of dealing with trouble permanents and then tutoring for stuff like Avenger or Craterhoof or whatever I need at that time. Ranger's Path gets me 2 forests. Of course, that includes my fetch land. I mean my shock land. Bramble Crush. For those who don't know what Bramble Crush does, it's destroy target non-creature permanent. So it kills planeswalkers. Martial Coup, for white, and X, you get to make X soldiers, and if X is more than 5, you get to destroy all creatures. So it can double as token generation and a board wipe at the same time. I don't run a lot of artifacts, but Relic is good when you want to exile all graveyards. An Eldrazi Monument, kind of when you're going to go for a swing where you don't want any casualties. Pumps your creatures, give them flying, and make them indestructible. And if I'm casting this, I probably have enough creatures where I can sack on my upkeep to keep it alive. Moving on to the enchantments here. True Conviction, even if you have a bunch of 1/2s from Avenger, this card can be really, really brutal. All your creatures get double strike and lifelink. Sterling Grove gives my enchantment Shroud, and I can sack it to tutor for an enchantment to put on top of my deck. Really strong. Awakening Zone makes tokens and produces mana, technically. Aura Shards works really well with all my token generation, but it can make you a target in multiplayer, definitely. So you have to play it strategically when you absolutely need it. Otherwise, you're just going to be a big target because you're stopping people from playing what they want to play. Mobilization goes well with a lot of the cards I just showed you, especially cards like Aura Shards. And you've seen that I make a lot of soldier tokens, and this gives them vigilance. Intangible Virtue pumps my tokens and gives them vigilance. Just really solid for 2 mana. Doubling Season with almost every card I've showed you so far is just really, really good. Basically, if I get tokens, they're doubled. Same thing with counters. Marauri's Wake pumps all my creatures, also doubles my mana, so to speak. Collective Blessing is kind of like Craterhoof in that you can play this card and win that turn, regardless of how big your creatures are, if you have enough of them. Because all your creatures get +3/+3. Martial Anthem is another card that pumps my creatures, but it also gives me the opportunity to reanimate some of my creatures from my graveyard if I pay the multi-kicker. So it's a pretty solid card, and people don't normally see it coming. Martyr's Bond, I'm not running black, but this says, if I lose something, you lose something too. It's Grave Pact on steroids. Cathar's Crusade, this the math on this can get out of hand if I have something like Parallel Lives or Dublin Season out. Thankfully that hasn't happened yet, but just a really solid card. Parallel Lives, it's a fixed Dublin Season. Run it for redundancy. Hunden, I know it's not a great card, but I like it, so I threw it in here. It's fun. And I run 2 Planeswalkers. Both of them, of course, make tokens. So Garrick, Primal Hunter, and Elspeth Tyrell. She makes tokens and she can wipe the board. I enjoy playing this deck a lot, and it actually plays pretty good in multiplayer. So if you have any questions about it, let me know. And as usual, thanks for watching LIFM.